This conference will now be recorded.
There it is. So it's being recorded now. As we are supposed to receive continuing education hours, we are asking that we keep the discussion on pest management, avoid nutrition and fertilizer comments. The same goes for irrigation unless it has to do with pest management, like example, mites in relation to lack of proper soil moisture, that type of thing. We are also honored to welcome Cal DPR to this AIE session, as they will be listening throughout the 2 hours. DPR was interested in the session due to the fact that there are not too many others going on right now that ran live like this is today. Most are video pre-recorded, so welcome to DPR. Another item prior to starting will be a disclaimer. This roundtable is a frank discussion about pest management decisions being made by the advisors participating. Sharing this information and this hopefully will increase professionalism in the field. None of this discussion in this roundtable is intended to be used as recommendations to anyone listening or participating. It is only based on our own opinion, not AAIE's. Furthermore, AAIE encourages those that are not licensed PCAs to seek one out for advice in each of the pest management decisions that are made on your ranch. AAIE does not endorse or recommend not using any products discussed today. All comments are the opinion of the participants, no more or less. There'll be a small quiz at the end of the roundtable, and we'll explain on how to access that when we're finishing up. You need to take it and pass with a 70% or more to receive your continuing education hours. For the full 2 hours, you'll need to look at the video also. You will only be credited for the amount of hours that you are actually online. So just let you know. Also, after the 2 hours are up, which will be at 4 o'clock, those of you who want to keep on going and discuss more items, we're going to keep the roundtable open, and we can visit some more if you guys would like. Not a problem. Although we're still only going to get 2 hours of credit. So I know there's a lot of us that haven't seen each other since last fall or maybe last winter up in Portland. So I'm sure that they'd like to catch up with each other. And if you'd like to hang around, that'd be great. Please remember that we are all volunteers, as you all know. And with the exception of Bill, and have not done this type of meeting in the past. So we are asking ahead of time to please forgive any glitches that show up unexpectedly, have some patience, and above all, be kind. So thank you. So let's get the meeting started. You girls have, what do we have on the chat here? We have anything yet?
No, I do not.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm seeing Bob Beatty right off the bat has, we've got a couple, and it's coming from Bob Beatty. I would like to hear from the group about what effect a main disruption on NOW is having on orchard populations and the reduced damage we have seen in the past 3 years on at least in pistachios. RM has seen similar reductions. And he would also like to hear grower acceptance of NOW main disruption. Are some seeing it still as to being too expensive? So has anybody got a chat back on that or would like to open up their mic and can respond? We can try it either way for right now. Anybody like to come forth? Can do it in a chat. It's up to you.
Yeah, we can open, people can chat, unmute themselves if they want to chime in.
Yes, or if they want to chime in, no one else is talking, you'll mute yourself and give me a, who's used this. I know Bill Thompson, you have experience with it?
Yes, I do.
Go, what, you want to make some comments? Go ahead.
We're seeing that we are getting excellent crap knocked down as normal, and we're also under heavy pressure. We're needing to apply a couple cover sprays to make sure that the final product is well below the levels that the growers want. But I've only used 1 to 2 years in small areas, and I'm seeing other people are getting a better results after they go in the 3rd year. So I'm expecting that this is going to be an ongoing tool that we want to implement for the NOW control.
Bob was wondering if do you see 30-day suggested use by the company? Well, that's a sprayable he was asking about too. So we'll go to that in a minute. Anybody else have anything to comment about on the main disruption?
I can
Either,
try from
go ahead.
just from our point of view, from Pacific Bot Control, the disruption is certainly something that continues to grow, and the ultimate, goal is to have a population reduction, and certainly that's what we're seeing with growers who have continued to adopt it year after year. This year is going to be interesting with a lower, pressure NOW. Will growers still value pheromones in their orchards going into next year with price being down? So from, a business standpoint, we might see some shifting out. It's hard to say, but hopefully growers will stick with it to, again, keep that population reduction, going forward. That's really the goal.
How was the NOW pressure this year? Was it high, or anybody like to talk about that?
In general, from our point of view, it was lighter than the year before. I think a lot of people were able to sanitize a lot better this season and had better results. That's the feedback I've had. Anybody else want to add to it?
I can chime in. Pressure was low down our way, but we've done a lot of number crunching. We've got 3 years worth of trials now on the mating disruption, and I guess just a couple of comments. First of all, my best estimate, we've kind of been trying to get at this. My best estimate is about 400,000 acres in California have mating disruption this last year. So when you add up the almonds and pistachios, so it's being used. That's a huge volume if you add up all 4 of the companies. But some of the number crunch we did this year, we continue to be getting about 95% reduction in trap captures. Egg traps, PPO traps, and damage are reduced about 50% really consistently across all 4 of the aerosol and meso products. So, efficacy-wise, it's there. We've crunched a bunch of numbers. I actually have a publication right now that's being reviewed. But we basically figured, so imagine if you had an orchard with no mating disruption, okay, you didn't use it. And then imagine you had 1% damage in your USDA grade sheets. All of our data says if you're under that 1% damage without using mating disruption, that if you had used it, you would have lost money on the deal, okay? If you got 1% damage without using it, that's the break even. If you didn't use it and you got more than 1%, in hindsight, if you had used mating disruption, you would have been better off in terms of both damage and economics. So that's kind of the break even there for people trying to judge whether or not they should use it. And then if you did use it, that break even is 0.5%. So, if you got 0.5% and use it, you're even. If you got less than 0.5%, you lost money on the investment, which was not a bad investment, it's just strict economics. And then more than 0.5%, you made money on investing. So, those are pretty normal damage levels across the industry. So, those suggest lots and lots of people should be using it. Of course, we can't keep using the same insecticides, mainly the main 2, every year, year after year after year. We've got to have some kind of rotational products in there to, to help maintain Intrepid and Alticor, keep the damage low. So I'm actually really, really happy with both the aerosols and the meso products for how consistent the results have been in our research. It's actually been fun to watch year after year getting those results. I like having good results and sharing with industry. I don't like trials that say that products don't work, because then the people that make those products aren't happy with me. So I'm glad that I think they're happy with me, because fortunately they're working in all the UC trials.
So David, Emily sent in a question. She wants you to clarify if that's almonds or pistachios.
All of that research is almonds. We actually attempted to do some pistachio research a few years ago, and the industry blocked us. So 0 pistachio trials that I'm aware of from UC people.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure folks understood that those percent numbers and those ROI economics were based on the premium schedule and everything for almonds and not pistachio, because that's a different scale.
Yeah, I do get people asking about what I think of pistachios, and all I can say is I expect it probably works similar, but I have no data to prove that. And yes, almond salaries, their almond premium scales are kind of a up to 16 cent a pound scale, whereas those premium scales in pistachios, you're up into 30 cents a pound. So that's where the real money's made with the main disruption is locking into some of those premiums.
As we go forth on this, folks, when you ask a question, first of all, somebody asked if we could have the questions for everybody to see them. There's some private ones that come through. Bob's been sending private. If he wants to send them to everybody, that's fine. Everybody else can see them. You go to the bubble up on the top right, you can open that up, and you'll see the chat questions as they're coming through. Also, if you do want to respond to one of the other attendees that are participating, say this is David Haviland. We know David, but at least the first time you talk, so they'll know who's talking. And this is Mike DiMincenzi. I'm saying this, that, or whatever, Paul Persetti, or what have you. And then we'll go from there. You can see the questions along the side too as we go. On NOW, anybody else want to touch on that before we move to another beast? There was some talk about sprayables, by how long the sprayables last. Do they go for the full 30 days or anything like that? Does anybody have experience with those? I know Sarah Goldman's on here. She probably does. I think her product has a sprayable. Anybody else used it, or Sarah would like to talk? Nope. Anybody
Yes. Yeah, it lasts about 30 days. Sometimes a little bit less. Sometimes you can see the trap numbers crawl back up in the first week.
Is there any resistance, any other than a general feel that the main disruption could be delaying resistance to insecticides, other than just the fact that I would assume that you might spray a little bit less by doing that, but I don't know that as a fact. Does anybody have any comments on that?
Yeah, that's the first. That would be great.
Well, I'll just say the question is there data? No, there's no data that delays resistance. However, just simple understanding of resistance, how it can develop and how that works. Anytime you're taking pressures off insecticides, either to spray less or that you're killing things by different mechanisms, whether that's sanitation or mating disruption or whatever, biocontrol, any of those are positive from a resistance management standpoint. So let's call it theoretical and not data-based, but that theory is pretty solid.
Okay. Anything else on
sprayables? I'll just be real simple on the sprayables. I've tested 2 different products. We've sprayed 2 to 4 times, and the very best reduction I can get in pheromone traps is 40%. So we've seen no trap shutdown, not even a 50% reduction in trap captures, no reduction in eggs, no reduction in PPO traps, no reduction in damage. Again, over 2 years of replicated 40-acre trials with 2 different products sprayed 2 to 4 times. So everything I said previously about the aerosols and mesos, I'm completely on board. On the aerosols, the data just haven't been there, and we're going to keep trying to figure out what's going on. My results haven't been as good as what was just reported by one of the companies.
Looks like Bob Beatty, I guess he could do his own question, but he's asking a question it's generally to everybody. And it's just, do we agree that NOW flies into pistachios from almonds, placing them at a higher risk? And I assume this is during harvest in almonds. Does anybody want to comment?
And vice versa, Bob. This is Bill Thompson.
Yeah.
I've seen vice versa. I've had pistachios next to my almonds, and the numbers are extremely high compared to where there are no pistachios. So they don't live happily together, you know.
And I the comment, Bill, and that is when almonds are next to walnuts, it goes up significantly, big time, really big time. We didn't the Linden didn't have a lot of almonds for a long time, but there was some, and they would blindside you if you weren't ready for the NOW coming in, and these were in varieties like Hartley, And this was 20 years ago. We saw that. Now with the almonds moving in from one end of the county to the other, we fully expect to be far more pressure for NOW. I know as they even moved into our Farmington area, we saw a big increase on the orchards there, even when we're within a half a mile of the almond orchard, especially if they were kind of downwind. So on the early varieties such as Sir. So I'll say that in walnut. I don't know about pistachio to almond or almond to pistachio, but almonds definitely have an effect on the walnuts. There's no doubt about that.
So Mike and Emily and David, didn't Jalindra do that work a couple of years ago, the influx between almonds and pistachios with the orange one?
Greg, yeah, let's see, Jalendra, Chuck, and myself have done several seasons. It was focused, that project was focused really explicitly on the almond and walnut interface, less so than the almond and pistachio interface. So Chuck Burks may have some additional data that includes kind of all three nut crops, are more focused on pistachio work, but we actually are continuing the walnut almond interface. They were continuing that even up until this year, doing the gut content fatty acid analyses profiles. They're also doing it in fig for those that are interested there, because we can tell where the larvae developed and get an idea on movement that way. And based on what's been shown is, yes, there's a significant amount of movement from crop to crop when there's adjacent crops, and it tends to follow a harvest cycle, right? When the almonds come down, you get the influx into walnut, and so we would expect that to be the case for something as mobile as NOW that has multiple hosts and will follow that throughout the season looking for resources.
I'm going to jump to Devin Carroll. He's waving his hands back there. Devin, what do you got?
Yeah, we see a similar thing in pomegranates. We never used to see NOW very much in pomegranates until somebody planted a pistachio orchard next door, and now we're seeing NOW. And maybe Rob Weaver could say more about that since he's the guy out in the field. Are you there, Rob? Maybe not. Anyway, that's what we're seeing. NOW, I never noticed them when I was out there, and then Rob started seeing them after they put the pistachios in.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Devin. I was filling my son's water. You're talking about out at the pomegranates?
Yeah. Did you start seeing NOW in the pomegranates when the pistachios were next door?
Yeah. Once the pistachios were bearing, we were just blindsided because prior to the pistachios having a crop, NOW really wasn't. It was not an issue. I mean, you might see a couple of them, but once there was a bearing crop on pistachios, the early foothills probably had 50% NOW damage. It just hammered us and blindsided us. Now that we know they're there, we spray according to degree days, and we've reduced those numbers greatly.
Very good. Good. We're going to stay on almonds till about, maybe we'll stay on it for about half an hour because it's such a big crop with so many people interested in it. To that, we're going to move on. One more thing on NOW before maybe we move on to any other problems that you'd like to talk about. Paul Processi, you had did part of that video. You were taking care of almonds out in areas that don't have any. You want to elaborate a little bit on what you're hoping or what you're looking at out there on what you did on the video?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I know somebody was asking about.
Can you talk close to your mic, Paul?
Can't hear you very well.
I was having some adoption issues due to price for that mating disruption, and I think I did mention that in the video. If I didn't, I should have. But that was a prime example. They thought the damage was nominal, and the price was just too high given the price of the nuts. So other than that, if anybody has any questions about the Delta, I'm happy to take them. It's not all that different from local, issues that we contend.
We're losing you, Paul. We're losing you on that. Maybe I can get you to answer back if anybody has any questions for you on the chat, and we'll repeat them. Your microphone's going in and out pretty light. If anybody has any other questions for Paul, put it in the chat, and I'll read them up. How about anything else? Is there anything else other than NOW on almond? I'm sure there is that you would like to talk about.
There's some questions in here. I think Bob's putting it towards the group. It says, does the group think that mating disruption, or MD, is depressing NOW within the Central Valley? So if anybody has information in their area, it says he's asking to determine if mating disruption will get the NOW suppression job done. So, and then he follows up with another question: experience with PPO lures. Is this going to be the gold standard with mating disruption and monitoring? It's a question.
Who wants to touch on that for us? Either through chat or open up your take your mute off and we'll hear you. No one?
I can answer, but I'd like to hear from PCAs first if someone else wants to chime in.
Great. Thanks, David. Go ahead, David.
Okay, so we've done PPO lures in all of our research trials. We've been very pleased with them. Instead of going in blind with the pheromone trap, we actually see the flights and can track it. I don't know what the numbers mean. You know, is a 20 or a 40 or something during the week what that means. But just from the general purposes of tracking flights, when do they start, we've been very pleased with them. And then real quickly, going back to the interface pistachio almond question, whenever I get that question, I think of two things. And here's an analogy. Imagine it's July 1st, you're a navel orange worm at the interface between a pistachio and an almond. Okay? On July 1st, that pistachio's got nothing for you for another month. Nothing is split. It smells like a dead old mummy. Whereas those splitting almonds on the other side of the street are, all the volatiles are coming off. That's where you want to be. So second flight gets into almonds. So if you're a pistachio grower next to almonds, that second flight getting into the almonds puts you at risk as a pistachio grower. The opposite's true in the winter, just because you can't sanitize pistachios as well as almonds. So any almond grower next to pistachios, you're going to expect to have more pressure. And when you got the two, you know, they survive better in the winter of pistachio, and then they get into new crop during the second flight in the almonds in the spring. That combination, allowing the moths to go back and forth, definitely makes the problem worse for both crops.
Okay, I've got a couple of chats. Monty, my answer to your question is yes. Growers want me to cut one spray out of almonds and pistachios to save enough money to justify the mating disruption. And then Emily Symes, David, how sensitive is the PPO lure numbers relative perhaps to pheromone or Peterson? Are you using PPO and pheromone? David, what's your answer to that?
So I'm so first, Devin, let me answer Devin's question. So Devin,
Right.
There's a new lure out there. It's called a PPO lure. PPO stands for phenylpropionate. And it's basically an attractant. It's a volatile from a plant that brings in females. So typically when you're using mating disruption and you have a pheromone trap, you catch no males. And then to Emily's question, we're always using the PPO plus the pheromone, that combination of the two. And that combination does pretty well. I don't know how sensitive that is compared to a Peterson. I've never tested them side by side. We're going to do that next year, hopefully. But Chuck Burks would probably have an answer to that. If anyone's done that work, it would have been him.
And then Emily Sims answers also PPO is a multi-gender attractant, correct? Not all moths and PPO only trap are female, right?
True. You'll catch both. You'll catch a mix.
Okay, great. Well, we beat up NOW pretty good on this crop. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? We move over to maybe another crop. We can come back to almond later on, but I want to give everybody a chance to talk about what they have. I'm sure we're going to be getting on to mites, as it was such a bad mite year this year. But did the almonds have mites also problems, or what happened on that?
Well,
Anybody?
Mike, that was my question related with the forest fires and the ash fallout, and did that have any effect on spider mite populations in the almonds? Because the leaves on the almond trees up here in the Madera Ranchos were just dusted with soot and ash.
Okay, we can move into that. Let's see, Bobby also says, let's back up and address the PTB question. What was the PTB question? Who had that? Devin?
I'm looking for, yes, I'm trying to find it right now.
Devin, go ahead.
The question is, I keep track of degree days for PTB for 30 years, and the the second generation always starts earlier than I expect. It starts at about 900 degree days, when the degree days that are given is 1060. My question is that real? Are we missing something? Because we've had some damage based on that, and I want to know what other experience other people have had on that.
Anybody want to bite on that one?
Devin,
No,
are
I'm
you
not going to bite, but by damage, Devin, are you talking about strikes on first and second year trees, or are you talking about actual kernel damage?
Well, we're talking about damage to the shoots.
Yeah, okay.
Because this is the second generation. Early fruit, maybe. Here again, Rob might be able to help me, but it never gets back to where it's supposed to be. I keep track of degree days. I send mine, off to other people, but I never know whether to follow 900 degrees or 1060. It's always very confusing because it doesn't seem to line up to what's given in the books.
all right, we've got some comments. First of all, Monty had a comment, started to talk. Monty, do you have something to say? No. Okay. Then we did have some responses, and we said, let's see.
hang on? Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Monty.
I'm on an iPhone.
That's all right.
It just takes a while to get it going. So the question I have for the group is for PTB or NOW, does anyone have an opinion on how they grow organic almonds? It's not a lot, but I'm just curious what tools they're using. I don't expect you to spend the next 20 minutes, but if you got a 2-minute overview, what you're doing at Bloom or Whole Split, lay it on me. I want to hear it.
Okay. Well, we can go into that. We have some other questions too. Did we give up on the PTB pheromone? That came from Bob. Second leaf amends used to get clobbered with PTB. I don't see that anymore, Bob. And Emily, maybe there's more aggressive NOW approach in recent years back to NOW. So let's finish up on PTB. Anybody have any comments answering Monty's question or Bob's? Nope. No one.
I've got a theory.
Sorry, David. My comment to Bob's question about why we don't seem to see PTB in almonds recently, my response to that had to do with NOW, not circling back to that, but maybe because we've gotten a little aggressive with NOW in recent years. There were some sprays added back before folks started going mating disruption. And if we see mating disruption adoption taking off the way it is and maybe peeling that spring spray back off, we might end up seeing more PTB again.
Okay.
So I've got a theory. I'm curious to know what people think about this. It's somewhere between a conspiracy theory and I think very real. And that is PTB for me, we still see it in the baby trees, which means it's still out there. We still get bucket loads of moths and pheromone traps, which means it hasn't gone anywhere. So to me, the difference isn't in the number of PTB, it's in the susceptibility of the crop. And PTB used to hammer almonds when everyone was on flood irrigation. Now that everybody's on these super controlled micro sprinkler systems where they're getting really good even irrigation all year and not that week to week swing from flood dry, I just think almonds have a really good shell seal from where they did in the past. And anytime you got PTB, it's between the hull and the shell. It never touches the kernel. And so at harvest, there's no damage. It's just the baby trees we have to care about. I think that's an integrated pest management. Cultural practices taking care of it.
I'd like to enter something else in here. This is Bill Thompson. Over the years, we've seen a lot of reduction in PTB when we backed off on the dormant spray. It's because we've allowed the gray field ant to propagate itself. And if you're an organic grower, you can go out in any of the orchards and you see gray field ants everywhere. And I'm starting to see a lot of them even in conventional orchards. And I think they're taking out the overwintering generation as it comes out of the hibernaculum.
Wow.
I give you a thumbs up, Bill. Great
I like
observation.
that. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're gonna move to another crop. There's a few more out there. How about pistachios? Talking about this. What's going on in pistachios? Carla, you want to start that off for us a little?
Uh, it,
No?
I'm just trying to figure out where to start. Yeah, it was definitely a challenging year. It was a good year, but challenging. I don't know, maybe saying good's not the best. Yeah, just there's so many issues again from east side to west side. You know, Alton area was huge this year. A lot of that had to do with, I think, just the humidity wasn't so much, you know, we do see it with irrigation, but I think more than anything this year it was just extreme high humidities that we had here. I'm not sure, like David, I don't know if they had high humidity down in Bakersfield, but here we did. I even saw it on the west side this year in pistachios. Alton area just blew up. You know, you see even crops that didn't have much photosphere because we have an ongoing problem. We saw some of that flaring up also. So, you know, it definitely was an issue. The fires were an issue. I mean, I'd be walking fields, use my mask because I couldn't breathe in the field because there was so much ash. You know, you'd walk up to go to touch your crop to check it out, going, that just doesn't look right. And you touch it and just ash would go everywhere. So I think that also caused some issues with Alton area and different problems of ripening this year because we weren't getting the UVs because of the inversion layer. I guess that smoke just kept sticking here. So I know it was super bad here. I guess it just depends. So this Big Creek fire is, from me as a crow flies, is 30 minutes. So it's really close. A lot of family and local people had to disperse and get evacuated. So yeah, it was very trying. So there's definitely a lot of issues.
The smoke really had a lot of an effect as has been brought up already by some, I think we'll mention in a minute. We've got a question for you, Carla, or anybody else from Bob. What are we going to do about the poor monitoring tools for big bugs in pistachios? Beating trays don't work so well after shell hardening. Golden Hills showed lots of big bug damage after shell hardening, wavy necrosis. There's over 1,000 acres of organic almonds in Kern. Oh, then he goes back to the almonds on the BT. Let's talk about the pistachios right now. What do you guys have?
I saw a lot of late damage. Growers that weren't mine, not necessarily my growers. I was just called into a couple of ranches wanting to know why when they're cracking some open, they're seeing this. I have a couple of pictures. I wish I could put it up of pistachios that just didn't look right, they thought. So what was happening is, I think using mating disruption, which is a great tool, we get to the point where plant bugs that we think that they're no more an issue or they can't get through with their styler in and cause some damage. But that late July, they were still getting through. So you can't see the discoloration like you can early on. And early on, they'll tend to abort and shed and fall to the ground. But later on, they're not. And so when you're getting closer, all of a sudden you're starting to see these it's really hard to pick up. It's just a little maybe discoloration, but there was quite a bit of damage and it was coming from stink bugs. Just around, I saw a lot of it, I would say Tulare area where I was called in and looking at. So I don't know if we're cutting back the sprays because of mating disruption. We might cut out a spray here and there because and that's causing the issue. I'm not sure. It's definitely something, but they're out there. We're just not seeing them, or they're seeing them in really small numbers and they're still causing damage. I actually saw quite a few of them with their proboscis or stylet and would get right through the end of the epicarp where the hinge is, where that soft tissue is, where they were going through there. And when you'd crack some open, you could see some mold growing because of the infections that they're moving around from place to place. So yeah, it was pretty.
Well,
So I just think monitoring is going to have to be, it's going to have to step up their game. If we're cutting out sprays and we want to keep that from happening, looking for eggs, looking for damage, stepping back, looking more at the tops, seeing if there's damage at the tops, you know, just spending a little more time checking things out.
bugs have become a huge issue, no matter what crop you're, it seems in a lot of crops. The pistachios, I know they are in almond, I know they are in the stone fruits and palm fruits. Bob makes a comment here, if you haven't seen it on the chat already, that these bugs are a lot of pyrethroid use. And unfortunately, that's the main we have to use on them. Trapping, I know for stink bug trapping, even in palm fruit, it leaves a little bit to be something to be desired. Or there's traps, but nevertheless, better big bug monitoring tools could save spray growers. Yeah, absolutely, and making disruption more acceptable. And we find out a lot with mating disruption. At least I do with the crops that I work with. That they have primary or secondary pests, however you want to look at them. They do create more issues. There's no doubt about it, particularly when you're in mating disruption, because the whole idea of mating disruption is to spray less. And when you have something like a bug that really only responds to the pyrethroids, they can all of a sudden be a real disappointment on what you're trying to accomplish. Anything else on pistachio?
I've fallen in that category myself. Walking fields, checking stuff out, and I see the dianthera, the acrosternum, the red shoulder, just the green stink bug, and you just, they damage to a certain point, and then you think, okay, where I'm safe. If I see a few, I don't stress about it. I'm like, okay, realizing that they can still get through that end of July, even though it's hardening off, and you're not going to see that blackening or that discoloration that you see early on. So a lot of it can get missed if you're not actually seeing the damage and that discoloration or the bug itself. Now, leaf footer, different story. They can cause problems from start to finish. So they're definitely something you don't, that tolerate much of them. If you see one, it's definitely something. But if there's a couple, yeah, it's definitely worth a treatment. But I've fallen the same thing, thinking, oh, it's okay. Then, we're far enough along. But you second guess yourself sometimes when you see that, and especially when you have growers calling and other PCAs, and you just try to work through the problem as best you can and give each other the information.
We've got a request to expand on Gill's mealybug in pistachio. Anybody want to tackle that, or a couple of you? What are you doing about it? Who has it?
I think we all do now.
Just
Everyone
pretty much
does.
everybody. And
Yeah.
real quick, Carla, what you said is absolutely right for almonds also, but the month is June. So PCAs are looking for leaf-footed bugs March, April, and May,
Right.
and being really good about that. And then at the end of May, they say, okay, my shells are hardening, I'm in the clear, and they basically go on looking for mites during the month of June, getting ready for hull split in July. And a silage corn field gets harvested next door, or tomatoes or something, the stink bugs come in, and then at harvest they got 5% damage. They blame navel orangeworm. They go talk to the huller and find out their orangeworm was only 1% and it was 4% stink bugs. They never saw it. They got totally blindsided, and there's no OPs, and in most cases no pyrethroids in the system just to take them out. So very easy trap to fall into. I hope everyone on this call that does almonds really watches for those stink bugs in June, because that's really becoming a big problem.
David, this is Bill Thompson. There was an alert put out by some of the shellers up in our country that there's brown spot was a big problem in the reject column.
Yes.
And they're thinking that it's the leaf-footed plant bug or stink bug. So, yeah.
It's probably not leaf-footed bug unless you saw a lot of, like, if you saw a lot of leaf-footed bug, then yes, it probably was. But if you didn't really see leaf-footed bugs around, and then all of a sudden this damage showed up, and it's the black spot. Okay, if it's a necrotic kernel, then yeah, that's from April, maybe into May. But if it's just the black spot on a fully developed, perfectly looking kernel, otherwise, that damage occurred in June, and it was probably stink bugs more likely than leaf-footed bug.
Okay. Okay.
And when you folks are using bifenture on the pistachios or the almonds, it doesn't pick up this bug at that time?
Don't use it at that time in the almonds. The
They don't,
pistachios might.
Okay. I know in Palm,
Bifenthrin in almonds, some people might put it on in May or April or May for leaf-footed bugs, or maybe stink bugs. And then some people would use it at hull split and beyond. But most almond orchards don't have a June application of an insecticide. Again, pistachios, that can be a different story.
In pistachios, usually about June, because we're coming off, we're in that little BV stage, and we're starting to expand. A lot of times we'll deal with calichorus and phytochorus. If the numbers, especially like I have a ranch that sits on 145, so we are really, really close to thousands of acres of farm ground. And so when that vetch and everything starts drying out, the influx of that, especially on the edges, can get extremely hammered by them. So we'll do a spray sometimes in June, and that will take care of those. So it can knock them out, but it's just definitely something to watch as we go through the season. Instead of saying, okay, we're in the clear, we're hardening off, we don't have to worry about the shells anymore. It's not the case. They're just getting through. Once they get a little further along, stink bugs aren't an issue. But I've seen stink bugs feed on almonds when they're splitting, and you can start to see that split. They'll take their little styler end and they'll just be drilling it right through there, feeding on fresh meat. And processors, same thing, complained this year, and most of it was stink bug that was getting through those damage and those dark spots. That's what that we've kind of figured out. It was more the stink bugs getting through than leaf footers.
okay. Believe it or not, we are halfway through the hour and a half already. You know what? For those who came in a little bit later or whatever, I just want to go over a few things that I kind of went over in the beginning. If you're in here late, you're in the AIE roundtable, you probably figured that out by now. I want to let everybody know the session is being recorded and for further use on the website along with other virtual video presentations. Make sure you show off your phone. If you're just getting on now, you can see how we're running this. It's so far so good. Depending on how many participants will depend. I think everybody's getting a chance to talk if they want to, or to put your questions in the chat. We are getting continuing education hours on this, so to keep the pest management discussion going, want to stay away from nutritionals, fertilizers, things like that. We would also, we've already welcomed, and we're doing so again, welcoming DPR. Cal DPR is setting in on this conference, just on this session of our conference to see how it goes live. There's not too many lives that have been live virtuals, I guess, up to ours, and they wanted to see how it was going to run. So they are setting in and watching us today, and welcome DPR. We're honored to have them. Another item prior is a disclaimer, and I'll read this again. This roundtable is a frank discussion about pest management decisions being made by the advisors participating. Sharing this information and experiences hopefully will increase professionalism in the field. None of the discussion in this roundtable is intended to be used as recommendations to anyone listening or participating. It is only based on our own opinion, not AAIE's. Furthermore, AAIE encourages those that are not licensed BCAs to seek one out for advice in each of the pest management decisions that are made on your ranch. AIE does not endorse or recommend not using discussed products today. All comments are the opinion of participants, no more, no less. There'll be a small quiz at the end of the roundtable, and as we get closer, we'll explain on how you go about taking that. You've got to see the video, participate in the video, and you have to stick it out with us for the hour and a half afterwards. And you'll get your 2 hours after you take the quiz and pass it at 70%. Remember, we're all volunteers. Any glitches that are going on, forgive us. And other than that, we'll show courtesy to each other, which is going well, I think. I think we're going to move on. Unless we got one more. Do we have?
We have actually a couple things. So Bobby, I could leave it nameless, I guess. Somebody says, bring back Lorsban, LOL. So, and then Ron Whitehurst, is anybody working on parasitoids with stink bugs? I don't believe so. David answering it too. It just popped up. So with pyrethroids being used, I think he's doing the same thing. It's counteracting, it's causing, killing the beneficials off too. So I don't think there's enough out there to control them. And then Greg is saying, if we want to discuss gills, millibug, and pistachios.
So does anybody want to touch on that? Then we're going to move on.
I mean, I have them, but I'm sure, I don't know if there's any new data, David, or do you have anything that's?
I don't have new data since 2019, but
Okay.
basically management programs are second half of May, Centaur, Orasail, or Movento, and then now there's Sequoia and Belay that are available. They've been a little less consistent, but can be effective. The problem is a lot of people are using that timing like they've done successfully for 15 years, and it's just not working like it used to. And so a lot of people are saying, okay, I did my May timing, it's not good enough, now what do I do? So second option would be second half of July at the next crawler emergence. And then people are starting to do their own experiments with post-harvest treatments and with May treatments to try and see how effective those might be. All the work I've done was basically assuming a one spray program, one and done, in which case second half of May is your answer. But as soon as you start saying what are the best 2 times to spray, because all those products aren't working like they used to, that's a new game. And I just finished a proposal to the Pistachio Commission for us to start doing some work looking at multi-spray programs starting this next year, but no data at this time. So all you can do is time the crawlers, get good coverage, use the best products, and you may need to spray twice.
Okay.
I had an issue this year, or actually 2 years ago. So I had a grower ask, we know it's there, we do the May, we just kind of look, we watch the degree days. If it's starting to warm up, we might back it up a week or add a week on, depending if it's a really cold, cool spring. Unfortunately, my grower had 100, so it was 105 acres. I actually think I talked to David about this, but it was 105 acres and it's split in 2 different irrigation systems. And so always rotating, we went in with Buyer Pro. And so we were putting this in. It was kind of a nice experience for me. The grower wasn't happy, but it was his oops. He ended up double dosing one side and thinking the water was switched over, which it was not. So he went and injected again. So here a couple of weeks later, a month down the road, this one side's blowing up and I'm asking him why he didn't treat. He's like, I'm treating, we're going back and forth, bantering. Come to find out, when I walked it off and roped it off and taped it off and said, hey, this is where it's at. And he just hung his head down and he says, that's irrigation where it splits. And he said, this is what happened. So he said, my bad. So anyway, I had to do a late treatment, which was an absolute mess. So the following year, again, that one side is really pushy back. So we did a late treatment. We went in, I want to say, I'd have to look it up, October 12th or 13th, through a research with Bayer, put it on Movento by, I think Dynamic, I can't remember, again, I'd have to look up, so don't hold me to it. Put it on and then followed up the following season, May, for our normal. And that one block that we did that fall application exceeded the rest of any of my others that year by holding on. And of course, we did follow up with that May 15th application too, and in combination with that fall spray, and it did very well. So we were happy that we got it back in check. But again, that was just 1 year to be done again, but I was pleased.
Okay, I'm going to be moving on to walnut now. If you have a question, Devin, do you have a question on walnuts?
No, I was just gonna, everyone probably knows this, but it's a real shame we have to use all these pyrethroids in the pistachios, where the biocontrol would probably take care of the mealybug, you can induce terrible mealybug problems in almonds if you spray enough. I've seen it where they just covered the trunks. And pistachios the same way. The parasites and the beetles, they'll take care of it. But what can we do? We have to use the pyrethroids for the bugs.
That is a big problem in all the crops that have issues with that type of insect, whether it be stink bugs or so. So that brought us back to a roundtable we had a few years ago on how do we take disruptive products that's kind of what we're left with and use them in the least disruptive manner, and that would be timing and what have you. So with that, we're going to move into walnuts. How'd everybody's? I think I've got some walnut advisors out here, practitioners. How did everybody's walnuts go this year? How about we've already beat the heck out of NOW, and I know it had to have been an issue in some places, from what I understand. Potential was there. I've got something from Bob, and it says seems like holly moths become much less of a problem in walnuts since Bill's days. Bill Barnett, and is it the main disruption or Chandler acreage? Anybody want to bite on that? I'll give them my opinion, but let someone else go first. Who would like to respond to that? How about Bill Thompson? You're out there, Bill?
Yes. I see a reduction in trap catches, but I got to be honest, I don't see a reduction in harvest. I've talked to Mike about this, and I saw the results that calling moth entered the crop before the navel orangeworm, and if it's delayed at all, and there's a few calling moth out there, these navel orangeworm go crazy. So I think calling moth's still a factor that we have to play with. I'm not disrupting, so I'm trying to time it with sprays. It's getting me down a little bit on my walnut acreage, especially Chandler.
Right. Hey, Paul, you watch a lot of walnuts. What do you got to say? Anything? Paul Processi.
How do I sound, first of all?
What's that? Sorry, Paul.
I'm sorry.
All right. Well, if you have an answer, go ahead. I have Emily Sims is saying up north we saw a huge first calling moth flight this last year. And then Bob asked about aphid too. Janine, you have something to say?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of agree with like what Emily's comment was, is, this year was certainly probably one of the stronger calling moth years we've seen in several seasons. It really kind of, I think with the mild winter, we saw pretty huge first flight. PCAs who didn't treat that 1A or 1B saw huge drops. They saw huge drops in Chandlers. So to answer your question, Bob, even though Chandlers, right, or the golden child, they don't get a lot of damage, they can have huge calling moth pressure populations. Even in blacks who we're seeing, disruption, it's a certain improvement, but Chandlers aren't to be ignored when it comes to the pressure. And yeah, this was a big calling moth year.
As far as the late varieties versus, we've got main disruption in the vast majority of my walnuts. We've had it now for going on 4 years, and it's helped immensely. Still, though, the pressure around the edges coming in from neighbors or whatever still is real high. We have to spray that out. And in some cases, we still are looking at even addressing sometime first flight, second flight for sure, and third flight maybe. We did have some real high pressures in some orchards this year. Some of the larger ranches that have multiple varieties were Sir and would be next door, we'll say, to Chandler. Sir numbers would be off the board, and we just thought maybe it was the lures, but it wasn't. Numbers were high. We treated first flight. Chandlers we didn't during the first flight because they weren't real susceptible. Caught some in the Chandlers. They had never been a problem, and it ended up where we treated all have main disruption, and it's a larger ranch, 600 acres or so. So the MD, is working, no doubt about that. It's been a long time. But the Chandlers ended up coming back with a little bit of damage, and I haven't got to be able to look at it at the destination yet at the nut company, but I would bet you that it was calling moth. So Collie Moth is definitely still knocking on the doors. This is not something that we're ignoring. And as we move into this next year, at least with my clients, May disruption will be one of the last things that I would suggest that they cut back on with these prices of walnuts. Which we'll probably talk about that a little more at the very end on how prices of things have an effect on IPM. But the main disruptions out there all the time, it helps a lot. And just because we're losing most of the pings and SIRS and BINAs are probably going to follow if this price doesn't change real soon, which probably isn't. So then we're going to be stuck with, we're going to be looking at Howards, Tulare,s Chandlers, and then of course some Solanos and what have you. So anyway, I think it's going to go to those. They sure seem to, if on my experience. So it's not something we can just close the book on. It's definitely still a player, no doubt about it. We got quite a bit of chat on this. Go ahead, Janine.
Mike, I was going to say Emily was going to chime in on that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm not quite certain what I was going to say. I think it had to do with sometimes our inability to gauge damage from codling moth because we really focus on that harvest grade sheet. And if you have a big first flight drop, I mean, that's yield that you're leaving. So sometimes we get to the end of the season, we forget about that part when we look at how the season went. I think that was my kind of supplemental comment there.
Which, the main disruption is even more important, picking up off of your comment, because with 65-cent Chandlers and probably 45, 50-cent Vinas, the growers are going to be extremely reluctant to do a lot of treating. And if they have main disruption in the field, they've already made that commitment to take care of that insect through the year. And they'll come back and say, to heck with the first flight or whatever, let them fall on the ground. They're not worth anything anyway. And that just adds later on down the line. So as you move forth on this thing, the economics play a huge part in how the growers are trying to survive. And that's good growers, not just growers that are, they're desperate. They're all desperate right now. Still a lot of them with the Vinas, they don't know whether to push them out or not because they know they're not going to get a lot for them, but it's the main variety on their ranch and they haven't converted yet. There's a lot's going to happen in the walnut industry here this next year, but I thank God we have main disruption in the walnuts. I think it helps considerably, and it's something that I'm going to really stress to my clients to keep using. We have
It's just really quick on the walnut. I don't know if everyone's aware that there was basically what used to be the BIOS project, the BIFS project, the biologically intensive farming systems. They just awarded $1 million to do large scale kind of IPM demo work in walnut with a big extension component, looking at mating disruption and again, looking at mating disruption for codling moth, similar to some of the earlier area-wide things that were done and including navel orangeworm. So I think that project is going to start up next year, and it's headed up by CAF, the California Alliance for Family Farmers, and is cooperating obviously with the folks at UC like Jalendra and the various extension agents. So just kind of an FYI.
Great. Yeah, I've heard about that. No, that's fantastic. We could use all the help we could get. And then to add on to it, we know we got DPR and everything's jumping around online, but on our laws and regs section for AIE, if you haven't seen that yet, the video, our director Dulcini talks about where we're heading in the future in California. And they're hoping to get more money to help out on IPM, to make better IPM decisions, whatever. But they're hoping to cut back on usage of the materials or pesticides. I'm dating myself, that we've been using. And so the more research we can get on, it's going to help because the writing seems to be on the wall on that. Both that came from both ag commissioners' offices, actually advising that the advisors, asking for the advisors to put down more mitigating measures on the recommendations than just the simple thing that we have that we sign over. I've lost my chat for some reason. I had something I was going to read. There it goes. We got a couple of walnut growers sanitizing, still hoping that crows do it. That's a huge thing in the future for NOW. Again, the grower will say, to heck with them, they're not worth that much. So we're gonna have to beat them over the head on that one to blow them in after winter and grind them up. Also, Monty has, Valen has a new product coming out for collie moth, mealybug scale, which is the Movento, and that's, I think, disease or something like that. Proproxifin, I think that's these blend that they're going to be coming up with.
Oh, okay. You want to pull that up?
And then I have one from Bob Beatty. Money is so tight, feel that the marketing board is not going to entertain new research reports in 2021. Tells me how strapped they are. I had heard that. Joe Grant said that they were tightening up quite a bit. Price drop, is the price drop related to COVID? That's a real good question. Your price drop definitely has an effect on IPM and the decisions that we're making in the field. And right now, I'm sure it's not helping. Let's put it that way. If somebody asked about aphid in the walnuts, anybody want to tackle that? I don't want to do all the talking. How about another walnut advisor? Anybody out there? Hello? No? Come on.
Hey, Bob, have you seen any aphids in walnuts recently?
Are you asking Bob Beatty?
Yes, sir.
You'll do.
My answer is no. It's been very interesting. Again, old fart here with going back to the days of Marjorie Hoy, where we had the argument as to whether or not the glutathione-resistant aphid parasite was natural or that we actually bred it. But I'm just wondering if the aphid parasites are now tolerant of the insecticides we're using, because I never see aphids anymore. Maybe it's just the wide spectrum of pesticides that we're using.
I would say it is. Aphids still can be an issue. This last year they were lower than I would say average for whatever the reasons being, but they definitely are an issue. Particularly depending on what your program is. We had a soft program in most of our walnuts this year, and we still saw some aphids showing up a little later in the season, even though we weren't doing anything to aggravate them, as were the mites. Mites were horrible, as they were in many crops this year. But on the aphid, right now, the old standby neonics, which I understand may have limited days coming up, are still been pretty effective. Some of the newer products that have just come on the market for aphid, some of the manufacturers have, seem to be quite effective. I did work with some of them long ago, and they were effective, and they finally hit the market now. And we've got some products out there. Problem is, newer products are always worth more money, and that'll make the growers reluctant to use them. So the soft programs help, no doubt about it. But what we have seen is on some of the soft programs is the hyperparasitism going on the trioxis. When you don't have anything going on at all, then sometimes the trioxis has a tendency to go to the wayside. And we felt that it was because of hyperparasitism going on. Anybody have any housefly issues this year? Or how was housefly for everyone? It worked well? Everybody nobody had any problems? Housefly seems to be the fly in the ointment, without making a joke, particularly in mating disruption, because the materials we have to control housefly normally have some disruptive nature to them, and that makes life a little bit harder. There's no doubt about it. Paul Processi, we skipped the aphid spray in a few spots 2 years ago, and it led to some burn on the nuts. Tulare especially don't tolerate honeydew well. Absolutely, Tulare has a real issue with aphid. You can put a population on a Chandler, even on a Howard, and they'll come through, and it won't show on the meats, but it does on the Tulare. So observations there I agree with. Bobby, now that Nick Mills has shown the western and orchard predator mite is rare, 6-spot thrips are more dominant. Do you see thrips showing up more in the walnuts to help with mite pressure? No, I don't. And I think we talked about that. David, elaborate on that. You're shaking your head.
Yeah, I'm totally baffled because the 6-spotted thrips and the almonds have been phenomenal. I mean, they come in, they clean up that early April May. There's no need for May sprays and almonds anymore. And then they always come in at harvest. Now, granted, you know, sometimes there's a little more damage than you want before they come, but they always come. Yet every time I talk to walnut people, even that are right next to almonds. Oh, and by the way, that isn't just a Kern County thing. You know, when we did our Pest Management Alliance project, Jalindra found the 6-spotted thrips all over the place in almonds up there in the northern San Joaquin Valley. They were awesome up there too. So, you know, why they're just so dominant in the almonds, that the mite issues, like nobody's spraying more than once for mites these days. We got a lot of growers doing 0 sprays for mites. If they are doing one, it's just either in their first or second hull split spray, just to make sure the mites don't get bad, but not even something they always need. But yeah, walnuts for some reason are just different. And, you know, I've wondered if it's all the husk fly sprays that are, you know, pretty much everything that kills a husk fly kills a 6-spotted thrips. So I don't know. I can't explain the walnuts, but I do know almonds and walnuts, something is very different in the two crops related to the thrips.
I think the walnuts, not only, I mean, collie moth, with the exception of just Intrepid by itself, which I know Jim Stewart, they use a lot of that down south because of the mite issues. If you're using it for collie moth or God help you if you're going for housefly, there's not much that you can put on for housefly that doesn't kill thrips. And actually, there really isn't anything. Tell you the truth, other than possibly, you get into the real soft products, maybe Venerates, things like that. But any of the even the soft, what we would consider quote softer, like spinosad or whatever, still knocks strips out, and it brings on the aphid. It will bring on both aphid, and it can bring on the mites depending on which the product is. Spinetoram, same way. And then when you get into the perithroids, like a sale is probably, or that AI is the number one, still probably the number one product for housefly usage. And we know that it's a neonic and has effect on thrips. But if the thrips haven't really become really well established yet, I've got orchards that have, well, what I was going to say is get really well established by second flight, which we'll say is, late June, mid-late June, early July, as we're starting to move into the second generation, or the second flight. At that time, we're using Intrepid Edge, which is, we would assume, is a softer product, is to knock your thrips out. If you have a few aphid and you throw a neonic in, it's all bets are off for sure. Like if you a imidacloprid is probably cheaper than a glass of wine, and that doesn't help the situation, and it's still doggone effective on aphid. So and it's hard to talk a grower into taking a product that's at that price and tell them to use something that's going to be 3 times the cost and no more effective, as some of them are newer counterparts. But neonics go out of the wayside, and they won't have a choice. But I think that.
I saw Emily's hand go up. I'm curious to see what Emily has to say.
Go ahead, Emily.
I just wanted to mention that in 2019 we did some walnut work using the yellow sticky cards for 6-spotted thrips and comparing those to visual samples. And up where I was doing that work in the Sacramento Valley, we definitely had 6-spotted thrips, but we definitely weren't finding them just doing our leaf visual scouting, but they were showing up in pretty good numbers on those yellow sticky panel cards, the thrips cards that now you can buy anywhere. And I'm wondering if there's a difference between the growers that do their husk fly treatments, ultra low volume every other row, as opposed to those that might have to do full coverage if they have a worse walnut husk fly situation going, and if that allows more of those thrips predators to persist in the environment. If memory serves on the data, though, again, it was one of those. They're quite heavy early, and then I think as the mites die out, I mean, similar to what happens in almonds, you see a lull in those populations where you feel like you most need it, and then they pick back up again. but they were certainly out there. And I think my recommendation is, if you're looking for them, stick the cards up and let those do the work to let you know if they're there, because we didn't have luck at all finding them on walnut leaf samples. And I don't know if that's a canopy structure situation, what we could reach from the ground and where they were actually distributed or not. In theory, they'd be where the mites are, and we sample mites from the ground. But those were our experiences in 2018, 2019.
We're, up in this neck of the woods in San Joaquin County, we saw actually our main beneficial we'll say for mites have been spider mite destroyer, which we always assumed populations are going to have to get really heavy, which they do, and which they have. And they have been our major. Actually, we've been trying to use products for housefly that would allow those to not kill them and to keep them in the field. And that's worked fairly well. David's coming with show and tell. If you can see his little picture, there it is. And those are his sticky traps. We kind of went over this a couple years ago, if I remember right. And David, you want to say what kind that was? You had a certain kind, if I remember right.
Right. So we tested lots of different kinds. The one that actually works best is no longer available. It got replaced by what's called Predator Trap. It's a Trace product we get from Great Lakes IPM. It's a 3x5 card. We put a binder clip on top with a unwound paper clip, and we hang it. We've actually got 3 different journal manuscripts right now in different levels of review on these. We've got some treatment thresholds for almonds, and these, by the way, are awesome at collecting the beetles that you referred to. So not just the thrips. We'll get 50, 60, 70 beetles a week on these cards sometimes too. So a great way to look for that.
Spider mite destroyers we're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah, Stepharis. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of chat questions coming through here, and we're only going to be able to, I've got 15 minutes left, and then we're going to keep this thing going. If you guys want to keep talking, go from there. Wait a minute. Hold on. So we can't answer all these, and we still have some other crops we still need to go over. Just let everybody know, if you've sat in on these in the past, we do this all afternoon on a normal conference. So shoving a whole afternoon into roughly an hour and a half, probably could have done this for 2 hours and did the video separate, but we did what we did. And so far it's going really well. We're getting a lot of great conversation. So on some of the questions that are showing up in the chat, if any of you have an answer to that, please put that down to someone else, so that I know Devin has questions, and he's got 2 or 3. John Holmquist has got some things about 6-spot thrip on the mites, whatever. We can mention some of these at the end if we have any time, but I would please answer any questions if you guys want. I can't cover them all in the next 15 minutes. Anything else on walnuts anybody wants to talk about? And then I might actually move to stone fruits or pome fruits. So does anybody have anything to say more on walnuts? I know mites has been an issue, and we just barely touched on this year. And smoke has been an issue, and we just barely mentioned, I think Christinas mentioned something about that. That was huge this year in a lot of crops. Anything to talk about on walnuts before we get into some of those subjects? Because they'll definitely dovetail into the other crops. Anything else you want to touch on real quick? If you don't want to say it, put it in the chat. I'll read it real quick. Has to do with walnuts? No? We're cool? All right. Well, then we're going to go into smoke, and we're going to go into mites. I don't care which first. Maybe they probably go hand in hand somewhat. The mite issues this last year were really abnormal. We had, again, I had main disruption in all the blocks. We didn't spray first flight in virtually any of my walnut blocks. And we had mites blowing up in those blocks I'll say mid-June, particularly on early season varieties. Sir, Payne, the earlier season varieties. Wet, dry soil. There was no doubt about it. And it can be directly related to that. And then also somewhat on how the growers are handling their orchard floors. Does anybody else have mite issues this year? I've been hearing I got a lot of calls from a lot of fellow practitioners will say that had a lot of issues. Anybody want to comment on what they went through this year? On any of the crops? Nobody had a mite problem. I'm the only one. Paul's laughing. No one had any mites. No mites. It was not a bad mite year this year.
Mites are bad every year, especially in almonds. Schaffner Law School rules in the West Coast.
You know, it doesn't surprise me that this is the response we're getting, because now as I'm thinking about it, we're in mid-November. I remember thinking that when I was talking to people, that nobody saw the early populations like we did up in San Joaquin County. And I think we got a little bit less rain up here than south of us, even just Stanislaus County. It was the mites up here were roaring. A lot of growers went 2 times, some of them went even 3 times, which is unheard of up in our area. But I'm glad to hear that no one else had any issues with it. How about the smoke? Any issues with smoke?
All of the above.
All of the above? Elaborate.
Just the smoke in general, I think, causing delayed ripening on fruits. I'm sure it had something, I don't know, the grape guys started to harvest when the fire started, so they might have walked away a little less unscathed. It delayed ripening. It was hard for harvest. It was hard for the harvest crews to get through, struggling to be out there and walking fields and working. So I think the smoke was a huge thing.
I think the smoke definitely had a lot of effect between the smoke and the ash. I think it had a lot of effect on a lot of things. We've had it now down here on and off for quite a few years, but Ron Britt, you're online. Turn on your microphone. Ron's being quiet. I know Ron is.
Go ahead.
Are you alive? Do you want to elaborate on what you guys see up there, Ron? E&W, for those of you who don't know them, Pacific Northwest Washington, and they've had probably more experience up there with smoke than we have down here. Although I think we're catching up with them. You want to touch on, Ron, on some of the things you told me about when you see smoke, particularly like in the apples?
Yes, I was very similar to what was just said on the grapes. A couple of years ago, we had smoke really bad. Since then, we've been getting some every year, but especially thanks to California, we got a lot this year from them. But we could see in the apples, which an apple is very sensitive to ethylene, and especially late in the year. And it was really hard I think it was 2 years ago, the apples would not seem to finish off. And the sugars didn't come, the taste really wasn't there. If you bought any of them, you could probably tell it. But I think it really does interfere with the production. It seemed like our hops didn't want to finish off that we work with. It was just a real difficult year for harvest. Now, the last year and this year, we didn't have as much smoke and things went fairly well. But smoke has a real effect on the plant growth, and I'm sure it does on the insects too.
Okay. Yeah, I know you had said about producing more ethylene. I know in some of the crops that we watch, that smoke really had an effect on the apples, particularly. I don't know if it came early enough. Randy, did you see any out in the Delta? Any effect on pear or anything like that?
Well, I'm not certain, but the latest varieties of apples would have been exposed to most of it. Of course, there was a lot of very hot weather at the end, September, early October, and that works against getting color on apples. And I think the smoke may have contributed to that as well, the smoke and ash.
We're getting a couple questions or comments. Bob Beatty saying smoke delayed maturity and any effect on the plum fruit flavor, whatever. I know it does on color because the coloring up on the apples this year down here has been really, really hard. Probably part of it has to do with the heavy heat that went so long. But still, it seemed to have an effect on that. Do you guys notice anything on flavor up there, Ron?
Yeah, that's what I said. The apples didn't seem to finish off right. The color didn't come and the flavor was very, very poor.
Okay.
But the heat probably has something to do with it too, because it's been hot years the last few years late.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
Right.
but smoke's been smoke is a lot worse than I think what most of us thought it could be.
Well, the smoke actually causes that delay of maturity by keeping the UV out. So the crop is not wanting to finish off like it should. I don't so much see the heat. Pistachios love heat, almonds love heat, but more it's the lack of it that's getting through the pruning, because we were having this problem with almonds on the ground. We couldn't get them to dry. They would sit there for 2 weeks and they were still moist. They were just not finishing off because of the lack of the UV from the smoke conversion.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the growers I work with, the apple growers I'm talking, but I'm not sure if you can get insurance on smoke or not. If not, we probably should be able to. Because I'm sure that definitely has an effect on the price that the grower returns to the farm.
We have here, we've got a few minutes left here. I had one question. Oh, golly. Bob Beatty wants to know, he'd like to have the attendees weigh in on whether or not we're winning or losing the battle on advancing IPM, monitoring time, zero tolerance, limited pesticides. Modes of action make IPM very challenging. He said in the nuts, but it's not just in the nuts, it's in all crops, especially just fruit crops, deciduous fruit crops, and we deal with fruit and nut. Anybody want to weigh in on that? We've got about maybe a little over 5 minutes left. Everybody's practicing it. Everybody's trying to do the best that they can. It's what he said. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Talk about that a little bit the last few minutes before we move on to the shutdown period.
I'd like to say something. This is Ron.
Yeah.
I'm finding I know California's been way ahead of us in agriculture in the movement into corporate farming, but I find it harder in corporate farming to introduce IPM and to implement it than I did with individual, independently owned farms. Is that the case that some of you have seen?
Yes.
Has anybody else seen anything like that or want to comment on that type of thing?
It can go both ways. I've certainly seen that, but at the same time, for something like mating disruption, it's the big corporate farms that are, that have thousands and thousands of acres adopting that kind of technology, where the smaller growers, it's not practical for them. So, yeah, it can go both ways.
Yeah, I think I'm referring more to the manager putting on materials that maybe not just insecticides, but maybe plant growth regulators or bio-nutrients. They're more prone to use that sort of material than the independent grower.
Could very well be. Other comments, Monty?
Just I see tremendous consolidation the last few years. I don't see smaller growers getting in our market. It's going the other way. And I agree. I mean, people looking at a budget. Unless there's a big demand for organic produce, they're trying to grow the product as cheap as possible. That's how they're graded by the corporate manager or owner. I just see people really sharpening their pencil more and more. I think it's a direct reflection of all the regulations that are coming down the pike from the state, and it's making it harder and harder to compete. It's not that they're not making money. It's just that the smaller guy just costs so much more money for him to be able to produce, unless he's in a farmer's market. It's just the world I'm in, but I'm Fresno South.
No, I think it's happening everywhere. Smaller growers are definitely, as they're retiring or whatever, they're definitely going into sheds or neighbors or whatever. So there's fewer and fewer, and that would probably dovetail in what Ron was saying, that because they're looking at bottom line, and before you were dealing with the actual owner, the guy that was maybe either on the tractor or at least really, close to the one who is. And now it's just the big corporate farming, absolutely absolutely different. And then when you add all the other aspects to it, you know, from the new regulations coming down on nitrogen, fertility management, nitrogen management, and food safety.
The Sigma law is really going to separate the men from the boys.
It makes it difficult because the growers are still trying to make a buck, and it squeezes. And we don't have nearly the technology yet to get into maybe sustainable, but organic right now. From what we were seeing, that it's very, very limited in many, many ways. You know what? We're getting ready to approach the 4 o'clock spot. We're going to keep this open, and we're still going to keep talking, but we're not getting any more hours. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it's going to take to get your hours, and you got to take the test, see the video. Janine or Bill, you guys can talk about that? Which one of you?
I'll jump in. Thank you, everybody, for attending our first live virtual session. This has been fantastic. Mike, you did a fantastic job. So after you've completed this, I will stop recording in a couple minutes, and then you need to watch that half-hour video. If you have not, please watch it. Then you take the quiz. The quiz will automatically signify whether you've passed or failed, and you have as many attempts to take it as you would like. And then once you've completed that, a certificate will be emailed to you automatically. The other part to this is that the reason you had to log in to the system is the automation of that registers all of your CE units that you've taken with us under your profile, so that now you have a CE record on top of all these certificates that you've got going. So make sure you take the quiz. That will signify for that to go out at the very end of it. But it won't let you take the quiz until you've watched that video. Okay. The other thing I did was I copied all your questions out of the chat, and I'm going to send those over to Mike, and we can try to process the answers and send them out to you. I have everybody that's logged into the program, but if you'd like access to those, I can get those for you. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop recording this session. I want to thank Mike, Kevin Chenzi, Carla Youngblood, and Janine and Bob for helping us out today. And David, thank you for joining us, and everybody else that did. Have a great day. And tomorrow, same time, we have the Grape Roundtable, same process to get in, but it is 2 to 4, no recorded session previous to the taking that. Okay, so please join us for then. Thank you.
Thanks.